I think it's important all for everyone here, this is I think you're gonna learn about some things here that probably even you didn't know about, which is why I just think these things have to be very, very informal. Because last year, if I was sitting in those seats, as I was trying to explain the budget, it's amazing what I didn't know about the county budget and how we do things. So this is always, to me, it's not about I'm trying to sell you something. This is a discussion. This is a conversation with the voters, and that's how I intend to run the meetings. During the last year, obviously, I've had a lot of input, and I'm just, like I said, I'm very surprised still that because this is a complicated project and people are busy, there's really a lot that they don't know about how we put our budget together and what the budget does for you and what parts of the budget are budget and which parts are splossed. So this morning, even though it's a dress rehearsal, I really look at this as if you're an audience of voters and I'm not just going through the motions here. Because I suspect you're going to learn a lot this morning about how our county works, even though you even work in the county or you're very familiar with operations. You're going to be surprised, I think, to see how really vast this program is and how much work goes into getting it done. So, I want to welcome everybody to the town hall. Just want to tell you how I'm going to do this. The first thing I want to tell you is that there'll be ample opportunity for questions. This is not going to be a one-way conversation. I want to explain to you how we got where we are today, what we're trying to do about it, and why it is I want you to join me in a partnership for the future of Cobb County. And at the end, I will stay here as long as you want me to answer your questions. So, but if there's something that's really burning in your heart right now, as we do the presentation, obviously I'll take the question. But what I would ask you to do is just hear me out, and then some of those questions might be answered. And then afterwards, if you have more questions, we'll answer those. And then if there's things that you want to do one-on-one after we're all done, I will stay around and answer those questions, okay? So, the Cobb, how we got here. It's building a county budget is no different than how you do things at your home. We have big things that come up in our life that we have to plan for. It could be you plan to buy a house, you plan to buy a car, you have a child that's going to go to college, and you have to anticipate those expenses and you start saving for them. Or you start making arrangements in your financial life to accommodate those expected big budget items. And that's exactly where we are right now. 4 years ago, we knew about what some of these big ticket items were going to be. Now here, we're going to list those things, right? We need to have that list of what those big budget items are. We need to have the pay study. The county employees have been very patient in waiting for the county, for the board to pass a pay study that would bring many of them up to the market level of what they would earn if they worked in the private sector. And that's all the pay study did. It was not a pay raise for everybody. Matter of fact, about 45% of the employees received additional compensation from the pay study, and the remainder did not. I think it's also important to emphasize that 55% that did not benefit from the pay study are also not going to receive any kind of a pay raise this year. That's not in the budget. But the 45% went to pay for people that we were trying to keep here and be competitive with the economy. And I think it's important to remember that out of the 2,400 people who benefited from that pay study, 1,200 of them work in public safety. So we've always said that public safety is number one priority, and this pay study reflected that, in fact, we were not compensating our public safety officials for what they could earn on the outside economy. So that was one big ticket item. A couple other big ticket items are health and pension costs. As we all know, as you do in your life, every year you have to pay extra to go to the doctor. We're no different here for our employees. And we've known about the healthcare cost increase, and we had the budget for those. Pension. Our pension plan, although not in danger, is not healthy enough to match the standards that the accounting firms, our rating firms, asked us to have. They'd like us to have something in the high, 70s or 80s, Bill? Yes. And we're down below 60. And I won't get into the reason how we got there, but it was a decision made a number of years ago that we're still suffering the consequences of. But we assured the rating agencies that we were no longer going to keep refinancing our pension fund every year. We were in fact going to lock ourselves into a 30-year plan to bring up our pension to be 100% vested, fully funded. And that's going to cost us, is it $8.6 million a year?
The increase this year is 7.5.
7.5, and the healthcare costs I think are 8.6. That's why I need these charts, okay, because I can't remember all these numbers. But the bottom line is that's $15 million. We deferred maintenance, deferred capitalization, which is a fancy way of saying we just didn't buy vehicles to replace vehicles that are used. Just like you have your 10, 12-year-old cars at home, we have the same thing here in the county. The problem is that if we transport people in these vehicles and they break or something goes wrong on the road, there's liability issues. So the bottom line is like you and me, we have to replace our vehicles every few years, and we just waited longer than normal to do that until we have this large fleet of vehicles that have to be replaced. So as you look at the chart here, you're going to see all the big ticket items that we've known about were coming. The problem is we didn't budget for them. That's the simple answer. We just simply deferred year after year after year, not buying them or paying for them.
Why did you approve them if you didn't budget for them?
I'm sorry?
Why did you approve them if you didn't budget for them?
In the sense of what?
You said that you had several items that you knew were coming,
Right.
but you didn't budget for them. Why did you, that seems backwards. Why did we do it that
Yeah,
way?
that's a great question. The answer is I don't know because I wasn't there. Right? And I don't. It doesn't do any good to do finger pointing. I deal with today, and today I have the bill, and so whether you like it or not, we have to address this issue. So as we do the budget, as we do the presentations this morning, you'll see those areas that we're trying to. We're not going to fix all this overnight. We're gradually going to fix this, and you'll see that in our presentation. All right. So talk about the millage rate. The millage rate, as everybody knows, that's how we fund the operations of the government in your county. And I don't want to get into a long discussion about your tax bill, but your tax bill is broken up into 4 parts. It's broken up into the general fund part that goes to pay for your libraries, your senior centers, for parks, for operations in the county, mandated or sent and otherwise, and you'll see that here later on. But this is the money we collect from you so that we provide the high quality services you come to expect from us. And if you'll notice here, here's our record of our millage rates over the last 27 years. It's obviously has a history behind it as to how we started at 12.22 and how we got down to where we are today, which is 9.85. Some of the things that we did back in the early part of this century is that we started taking money out of the water fund so that we would reduce your millage rate. The downside of that, of course, is that eventually you have to replace that money in the water fund too because they have their own expenses. Over here in the later years, once we got self-sustainable, we started putting things into SPLOST, paying for them, so we could keep take your millage rate from 9.72 down to 9.6. And this worked, of course, until the recession, when the millage rate jumped back up to over 10. And then over time, we reduced that millage rate back down to 9.85, but we were still doing practices like moving more and more things into SPLOST and increasing the amount of money that we were taking out of the water fund. So I've argued for a long time that a 9.85 millage rate is really an artificially low millage rate. If 12.22 reflects a number where we paid for things like paving the roads, we paid for things like buying cars, we paid for things like buying software and hardware equipment to run, our networks. And then over time here, we either use the water fund to pay for those things, or we put them into SPLOST. And so here we are right now at 9.85, trying to get back to a sustainable level of how we ran our county here for about 10 years, between 9.6 and 9.72. What I'm trying to do here is even out this graph like it was back in the early part of the century, and yet also doing it in a way that reflects a growing population. So, when I talked about how we paid for things to keep our millage rate low. Here's some examples of what we did. Take a look at that. Yes.
Looking at that last
Yeah, back
slide
that
you
up.
had up,
Sure.
can you tell me, you mentioned back in the days where we've used the SPOS and it kind of artificially misrepresents what we're actually spending. Do we know what the current SPOS revenues represent as in mills?
Yes, we can do that.
In other words,
we
the
take
amount of
we-
revenue from SPOS, how many mills?
We take
does that-
$140 million, we collect about $140 million every year for SPLOST, all right? And that's roughly a little less than 3 mills, if I'm not correct. About what, 2.85?
About 30 million per mill.
So 30 into 140 is a little bit less than 3 mills. I mean, it's four and a half, more than 4.5 mills.
So essentially, you're right. If you add that 4.5 mills to that 9, we're actually at 13 some odd mills.
We'd be close to 14, yeah. But, and I'm not arguing to do it with SPLOST, okay? Because the beauty of SPLOST is that it spreads the revenue out among different people
Right.
rather than just the property owners.
All them people from Paulding County tearing up our roads.
And we're happy that they're coming here using our, buying our
I live in
things.
Paulding.
All right, okay. But that's a great question, and I think I might bring that up
Yeah.
during the discussion.
That's why I asked you.
Because we didn't do our first SPLOST until the late 90s, all right? Which explains the high rise, the high millage rates at that time, relatively high. Okay, so this gives you an idea of how over time we started using various reserves to fund our general fund operations rather than raising the millage rate to reflect that. The problem with this, of course, this is the famous one-time money. It's great until all the one-time money runs out. Yes,
Are required reserves full?
they are.
They're
They are sacrosanct.
Okay.
I'll tell you right now, the bond raisers have made it very clear to us that if we touch that, we better replenish it in a hurry, or we will lose our AAA. They made it very clear about that. But we have never touched the reserves. That's just an operating principle we've gone by, and it's 9% every year, and we maintain that amount.
What is that amount approximately?
Right now, it's about 30, how much is it, 35 million?
So 35, 36 million.
35 or 36 million dollars, right.
And then there's, and the disaster recovery is about 7 million for it.
So,
Those are the two.
but again, the one-time money works until we run out of one-time money. Or as I tell people, it's okay to rob Peter to pay Paul until Peter leaves town. Well, Peter left town. He's gone. So we're in the situation now, what do we do, given that we have no more reserves that we can use to offset having to use millage rate to pay for those operations, which we're gonna see here in a very short period of time, okay? This is where I tell my joke about,
Yeah. We haven't replaced computer capital.
I have a question for you while he's getting that right. You mentioned the rating agencies. I hear that Cobb has been given a stern warning for the last 2 years concerning our AAA rating. Why should we as citizens care about what that rating is?
because we have to borrow money every year to bridge the gap between when our revenues run out and when we start collecting revenues again. And that happens over the summer. And that amount of money that we borrow comes with an interest rate. So if you have a higher bond rating, then your interest rate is lower. So that's why we want to protect that AAA rating, because this year we're having to borrow $90 million. Now, it's not for a long period of time, but it's money, and it comes out of the general fund, which is less money I get to play with when it comes time to address future purchases we have in the budget. All right, so I was talking about deferring capital. These are some of the things that we're talking about. And we could have had a lot more pictures on this PowerPoint slide. The bottom line, you get the picture though. We have $100 million in building maintenance and vehicles that we have to replace because we simply didn't address it over the last 4 years.
Chairman,
Yes.
how in the world can county the size of Cobb County,
Mhm.
with its history, normally proactive, not have a capital spending program?
Well, my guess is, and it's only an opinion, we were doing everything we possibly could to keep the millage rate as low as possible. It's politics. No elected official wants to raise taxes, all right? They wanna be liked by everybody, and the way you're liked by everybody is you don't raise taxes or you lower taxes. You're never liked if you raise taxes, all right? So I think that we, the board did everything it possibly could for as long as it could to meet that goal of making sure that we had looked at every single source we could before we went to ask people for more money. And that's why some of those actions are something I might not have done. But I wasn't there. I don't know what the reasons were, but my guess is the overall thing is that we're a very conservative county. The board reflects that, and we hear people saying, please keep our taxes low, and we did that. But there comes a time when you have to deal with reality. And this is the year we have to deal with reality. All right, so bottom line here, as you can see over the last 15 years almost, we have kept our spending down per the number of people that live in the county. And I was at a symposium a couple weeks ago where the gentleman leading this class that I was in talked about his county having one employee for every 14 people in his county. Well, we have one employee for every 148 people in Cobb County. I think by every metric, you'll see that Cobb County is the most cost-effective county in at least in this part of the area. And every year, we do our best to keep those costs down. And the graph, no matter which one you use, will show that. Okay, so these are really busy charts, but the bottom line here, this in red is the one that started the rating agencies to show concern. Because these showed that we started using the famous thing called fund balance, which is the money we have, that we don't spend for various reasons. We started using that money to keep our millage rate at a low rate. And you can see also the trend was we kept using more and more fund balance to pay for our operation of our government. And they finally said this year, you can't continue to do this without this having an impact on your rating. $20 million out of fund balance. That buys a lot of things. It buys a low millage rate, but it buys a lot of things. All right, so I talked about the SPLOST, and a lot of people have confusion between what it is that your tax dollars are used for. But the SPLOST, as we know, that is a special tax. It's a 1% sales tax that can be only used for projects approved on a list that we submitted to the voters by referendum. And you can see over time here, over the first SPLOST, what we've been doing more and more. We've been doing projects in SPLOST that in previous years we would pay for by general fund. Okay? Look at all the things that are in SPLOST, the 2016 SPLOST, that were never in previous SPLOST. They had a higher millage rate. And the reason they had a higher millage rate is because we paid for things like, like public, like for facilities and libraries and public health and senior services. We paid for those out of the general fund. So we had a higher millage rate because we had to pay for them. By pushing them into SPLOST, we get to lower that millage rate. But remember the slide that we have a population going from 470,000 people to 750,000 people. There's no difference in you living in a home. If you start to have more kids, all right, you have to pay more because you have more kids. Well, we're a big family in Cobb County, and we got 300,000 more kids to take care of. So we have more requirements, and we're trying to find a way to pay for those requirements. And when we did that, we started using your SPLOST dollars to do that. The danger of that, of course, is that if we ever don't renew the SPLOST, guess what happens? All right? We don't pave another road in Cobb County. That's the danger of putting things in SPLOST that used to be paid for by general fund dollars. SPLOST is meant to be used for special programs like a jail expansion or a new courthouse or new public health facilities. It was never meant to do what we've done with it, which is to use it for general fund purposes, and that's where we are. So we should be grateful that we have this in SPLOST, because it keeps our millage rate a little bit low, but the danger is we better hope we renew it, because if we don't, there'll be some serious challenges. All right. Now we're going to have the world-famous journalist Ross Cavett.
Here are 4 things you may not know about your property tax bill. For those younger than 62 years old, on average, more than 70% of your bill goes to the Cobb County School District. Cobb County's general fund is a distant second, and a sliver of the payment goes to the Parks Fund, followed by the Fire Fund. In fact, the percentage of Cobb County property tax bills that goes to the county's general fund in recent years has declined from about 19% of your bill in 2012 to about 12.7% last year. That's primarily because of the floating homestead exemption. If you live in your primary home, you likely have the homestead exemption listed on your tax bill. Many people don't know is that Cobb has a floating homestead exemption, which means as the value of your home goes up, the floating exemption keeps the rate at which you pay into the county general fund frozen at the level at which you bought your home, or at least applied for the exemption. Here's what that looks like. We picked a random, longtime Cobb County resident, we'll call him Mike. Mike's house has been reassessed to a value more than twice the amount it was 15 years ago, yet he pays the county general fund less money than he did in 2002. When I looked at my own property tax bill, I found my home's assessment is up 11% over the past 5 years, and I contributed $40 less to the general fund than in 2013. Remember, this affects only the county's general fund. Tax assessor says 52% of all residential properties in Cobb have that floating exemption, which last year saved taxpayers but cost the county's general fund more than $23 million. Our finance director calculates after taking into account a predicted increase, the county can expect a boost in the neighborhood of $6 million in the general fund if the tax assessor's prediction comes true. Next, the Brave Stadium. The general fund is one of 5 sources of funding for the project. Cumberland Special Services District, where businesses in the area tax themselves. The Special Services District 2, the already formed $3 a night hotel motel tax, and a rental car fee. The remaining money going towards stadium debt does come from the general fund, and this year we expect to take from that fund $6.4 million for debt service, $1.2 million for capital maintenance, and around $1 million more for police, traffic, and insurance. That accounts for about 2% of the general fund budget. Since the other buckets are filling up faster than predicted, and the area around the stadium is attracting more development than expected, the county hopes on chipping away at the general fund obligation over the coming years. And finally, for reasons that have been discussed prior, Cobb County has managed to keep its millage rate well below our metro neighbors that have a similar population, all the while providing similar, if not superior, services. If you live in unincorporated Cobb, you pay far less than your neighbors who live in one of the county's 6 cities. This is a comparison with school taxes included. At the same time, the population of Cobb County continues to grow, putting more pressure on county departments to serve the growing population.
Okay, and then here, what I've asked Ross to do is, I've asked him
Here are 4 things you may not know about your property
I've asked him to replay the video because I enjoyed it so much.
Years old, on average, more than 70% of your bill goes to the Cobb County School District. Cobb County's
Buy him a new laptop, Sharon. Got a mind of its own here. I've asked him to put up on the screen my tax assessment. And the reason I've asked him to do that is this is the part that I think that it's really the issue for most of the taxpayers, but they don't understand what they're really being taxed on.
Jeremy's on the other thing that you didn't want to use, so I'll
All right, and the reason I'm doing this is I'm gonna circle the number on my tax assessment that pertains to the general fund. And I'm gonna compare that against the fair market value that's on the tax form. And I think that's the key part that I didn't address last summer, but needs to be addressed this year. They really don't understand, and I mean this, they really don't understand that they're not being taxed on the fair market value of their home. They're being taxed against the floating exemption part. And when they look at their tax form, all right, they need to see that. It's not to diminish the importance of the fire fund, of Parks Bond, or the school fund. But I'm not interested in here in throwing anybody under the bus, but we really need to focus on that part of the tax assessment and show them what it is that we'll be talking about when it comes to the budget in 2019, how we're gonna pay for that using their taxes. So, the beauty of this floating exemption, of course, is that your house can be valued at $1 million. But if you bought the house 40 years ago, more than likely, you're being assessed at a house value probably somewhere around $50,000 to $100,000, if that much, depending on the size of the house. And that's the $23 million that we lose because we're not taxed against the fair market value, we're taxed against the floating exemption.
Well, Chairman, you just raised fees for the seniors. Are you all thinking about now taking away the floating homestead exemption too?
Yeah, darn right.
Jeez, you know I need to move to Cherokee County.
The reason that we raised implemented the senior fees, that was a suggestion by the 2012 Citizens Oversight Committee. And when I came in office, I said I was gonna take that study off the shelf and reopen it and to look at all the things that we hadn't done yet, and that was one of them. But I think the most important part about the senior center fees is that it shows that we're all in the game together. If we have a situation where we're trying to ask you for increased millage rate, which is obviously what I've been trying, as I said I'd like to do, and someone can say, well, they're not paying their fair share. So what I'm trying to do is have everybody has skin in the game so that nobody can say that somebody's getting an unfair advantage when it comes to the millage rate. Now, obviously, there are some programs out there that I can't do, like the libraries. The law forbids me to implement any kind of fees involved with the libraries. So I'm just trying to level the playing field here so we go forward, as many people as possible are involved in this process. They all have, as I said, skin in the game. And $5 a month is the amount that we came up with. We're still under review about whether or not we're going to charge any fees for the rooms. That's still part of a larger committee, and we haven't found any answers on that yet. But fees will stay in place because they do help offset some of our shortfall. We have over 2,500 people that signed up for the fees, and we will take a look at those fees again next year to make some modifications based on what we're hearing so far with regard to the fees.
Chairman, if everybody's got skin in the game, there was $1 million paid for Braves traffic and DOT, but there's no contractual agreement that says we have to do that.
Right.
Why are we paying $1 million when everybody, other business has to pay for their own traffic?
Well, the board agreed that it was a contractual obligation under the agreements between us and the bond. But the good news is that Commissioner Ott is working very hard with the hotel motel owners to find a way to use the hotel motel tax to pay for public safety around the stadium. That will take that out of the general fund, and that'll allow us another $1 million for some of the programs here. So
Well, the Braves are making millions of dollars here in Cobb County. Why are the taxpayers paying for the Braves? Can't we hire an attorney and get out of that contract?
Yeah. Why can't we do that?
I'm a Yankees fan anyway.
Sorry about your team. All I know is we have a better record this year. You know, the answer is, the short one is that we signed a contract. And whether or not we like the contract, it is a contract. It is a two-part contract between us and the Braves. The Braves themselves would have to agree to renegotiate the contract. And they're a business. And they see no reason to renegotiate a contract which they believe was signed in good faith. What we have to do is to take a look at that contract and make sure that both sides of it live up to every obligation that's under it. As much as I would love to say that we're going to have enough taxes from the Braves and the development around there to reduce our obligation under the debt to zero, that is going to be many years in the future. We will, for the foreseeable future, have an obligation out of the taxpayer's wallet of $5 million a year. And I know people aren't happy about that. I get that part. But it is a contract. And the bigger message is to the business community is that we're a county that keeps its word. We need to have businesses come to Cobb County because businesses are one of the reasons we can have a low millage rate because they don't get the floating exemption. They pay the full value of the millage rate. So when I have a company that comes here and is valued, their property is valued at $200 million, I tax that at the full millage rate, not the floating exemption rate. I need to have companies like that, big and small, because that helps offset what we're paying for in our millage rate. So I know that the Braves are always going to be an issue that's going to rub many people raw. And I think we have to acknowledge that. It factors into my thinking every single day, is that I was elected on a campaign that I didn't believe the agreement was done in an open, transparent manner. And I try to make sure that everything that I do reflects my commitment to the people that whatever we do, whether they like it or not, at least they can criticize it because we've openly told them what we're trying to do and we get feedback from them. But I think it's important, as I tell people, we shouldn't go around saying to people, we need to get over this. They're never going to get over it. All right? I just want to say that before. They're never going to get over it. But what I can do is let them know that we're doing everything we possibly can in the agreement, that it is an equal partnership, and they're not getting any more out of it than we're getting out of it. And so far, the development around the stadium is what's really bringing in the revenue. The video didn't give enough credit to the fact that we get to tax every single entity around the stadium at the full value. They're not part of the agreement. The Omni Hotel, the Comcast building, the Battery, the Synovus building, the Home Depot Supply building, all that development that's within the radius of the Brave Stadium, we get the full tax value of that, plus the equipment that they have in their businesses. Every hot dog machine, every Coke machine, even in the stadium, we get to tax that. And it's significant. I believe the Braves equipment is valued at somewhere like $90 million. Is that right, Steve?
That's correct.
So $90 million of personal property equipment inside the stadium we get to tax. So, it's a business deal. You win some, you lose some. I just think the real issue here for the Braves was not about the amount, is that we didn't go to the voters and ask their permission first. And for that, they'll always resent that. Yes?
Towers are on a development authority project. Synovus.
Right.
HP.
And they get an abatement.
Right.
Right, but we still get to tax them over time.
Down the road.
That's right. We get 10% this year, 20% next year. We will in fact get full value from there. And again, that's a business proposition. All businesses want some kind of incentive to come here, and by the development authority, we get them going. So we're good on that. All right, so let's get into the budget. All right, here's what it's all about. This is our world right here. By now, I hope everybody's seen this pie chart. It breaks down our universe in the budget into three different segments. The mandated. All right? These are programs in the county that the state or federal law requires us to have. All right. Who knows what some of those are?
Sure.
Sheriff's one of them. What's another one?
Courts.
Courts are another one. What's another one? District attorney. That's another one. So we pay them because we have to pay them. Now, obviously, we negotiate what it is we pay them. They just don't give us. We don't give them a blank check, but we have to pay them enough to do perform their job. Because if they don't, they sue us, and we still pay them. All right. Plus, we lose the court costs. The essential. These are programs that are not mandated by law, but I think we believe are critical to maintaining the government responsibilities that we're assigned by law to do. What do you think some of those are?
Police.
Police is one of them. What's another one?
Water department.
Water department's another one.
Roads.
Roads are mandated, but we pay for them out of the essential. Okay.
Fire.
Fire, but we pay for that out of the fire fund. So this is where you need to show the essential slide. All right, there we are. Those are some of the things. Believe it or not, the state court is not a state court, as I found out last year to my regret. All right, the state court is a county court, but we call it a state court. But there is no requirement by law to have the state court. So if I did away with the state court, I'd save $14 million, and Judge Joey at home would be very unhappy because everything that the state court does would now go over to the magistrate court, okay, which is required by law. So we do this, we have the state court along with the solicitor to speed up the judicial process. The bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, if we didn't have the state court, a lot of those funds would go over, and we'd increase the size of the magistrate court to handle that course load. You can't keep people in jail forever around here. There are constitutional requirements about how long you can imprison people. And then the last part of the pie is the desired, and that's the real issue for the taxpayer. Because in the desired is where all the fun stuff is. Desired is that part of the county budget that makes this county unique. These are the programs that we have implemented over the last 50 years that makes Cobb County the place, the choice destination for people who want to come to work, play, and pursue their dreams. And look what's inside there, all right? These are the ones that really, where the rubber meets the road when it comes to politics. And I'll just give you one example, the library, all right? If we were to cut any library, I don't care which one it is, I'd have 500 emails. Yes, Sam?
How can you put public safety training in a desired versus an essential, if police are essential?
Well, that's one of those budgetary issues that go back and forth. The police obviously think it's essential or mandated, all right? Whereas we at the board think those are nice to have items to, you know, if the board judges that those are aspects of certain programs here that we believe should be funded only if we have the necessary funds to do so. And it's a judgment call. And we're always gonna have that. And we have that right here with all of you because you're all saying, no, library should be at least essential. Right? A lot of people feel that way. The seniors, I'm sure, feel like, no, they should at least be essential. So these are the kind of discussions you have back and forth, yes.
Yes, sir. How can the airport be a desired? If we didn't have it, are there not fees or funds that we would have to give back?
We would, that's correct, because it wouldn't be there.
Right.
That's right. But the beauty of the airport is it's a self-sustaining program, but it's, again, there's no requirement for us, by any standard, to have an airport in Cobb County. We just choose to have one because it supports our economy and brings businesses here.
So what's the difference between the cost of the airport and the revenue that's generated by the airport annually?
Because the revenue from the airport goes back into funding airport programs, just like it does for the water system.
So is it making money? What's the difference between cost?
That's a great question. Is the airport generate extra revenue above and beyond what its requirements are?
It did in FY17.
It did not.
It did.
It did. And how much?
I'll get that for you.
All right.
And
So
it has an economic impact of more than $1.3 billion
Boom.
to the economy in Cobb County on an annual basis.
okay.
And I forget how many
Glad you said
employees
that.
are actually.
Good.
So if it's desired and
I have no idea how I know these stats.
if we eliminate the airport, we'd actually lose money.
We do. We do.
What about extension? I mean, doesn't the university do that?
Well, the reason I think that the extension is mandated is because my wife's a master gardener. It's interesting.
Let's put that one up there right with your home values too. Those are gonna be great things.
You know, every county in Georgia has an extension. And that's one of those programs where, yeah, well, who needs an extension? Until you get into it and you see what they do and the broad scope of programs they have, that starts with they have things that take care of that our kids are in, that turn them into leaders. So they're complementing the school system. There are a significant number of people in Cobb County who use the extension, not just because they're farmers, which is originally what it was intended for, because as you go around the county here and you see the personal efforts that homeowners make in trying to keep this county beautiful. So again, as I peel back that onion, it's not required, all right? The state does give us some funding for that, but it is one of those programs that over time, people have said, this is beneficial to the county. It enhances the beauty of the county, and by enhancing it, it enhances our lifestyle, and hence it enhances people who want to come here and live and want to stay here. So, if we got rid of it, yeah, we'd have a lot of angry people, all right? But it is not something that's critical in this instance. If we ran out of money, it's not something that if we took it out, I believe would significantly impact on the county economically. But what it goes to is the character of the county and the kind of county that people want to live here. And the extension supports that view. Yes?
How much does this public safety village cost us a year?
10 million? Gotta have your book.
Yeah, I'll go.
You got your book. The bottom, it funds, there is some funding for it, but there's also grants and 501c3s.
Foundation.
So that they offset some of the cost. We do not completely 100% fund the safety village. But again, it goes to our effort to complement the efforts of the school system. It runs thousands of kids through there to teach them fire safety and public safety. So it has a benefit to enhancing our work in the essential category of police and in the mandated category of the sheriff. Again, it's one of those parts of the table where if you take that leg off or cut the leg short, the table's going to be unsteady. But it all works together here to our bigger image, responsibility here of our first priority in the county of public safety.
So when I look at this budget, I see that more than 70% of the budget is for personnel expenditures.
Yes, that's correct.
This is ridiculous.
Except when we get rid of those people.
Well, why would most of the budget consist of personnel?
And-
How much are you paying yourself?
Not
These are the
enough.
things we need.
Not enough. Not enough. Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Barnes. You know,
I don't think I thought that.
I remember when I was campaigning, I had the same question. Because in the world I came from, once you started getting about 50% of your budget for personnel matters, then there was a tendency to think that, well, there's some fat in the program. Well, I gotta admit that as I got into the details, the reasons almost 2/3 of our budget is personnel is because we deliver personal services. We're not a county where when you call somebody, you get, a 3-minute message about where to call. You get somebody that talks to. We're a very human county that has a lot of compassion, and we want to make sure that people know that we want to respond to them in the most efficient manner. And that most efficient manner, in most cases, is with people. And I'll give you the best example of it. I had a discussion a couple weeks ago with the HR director from Home Depot, and I ran this scenario by him. I remember when I first moved here, almost 20 years ago, Home Depot, they changed CEOs, and they brought in a gentleman whose idea of increasing the bottom line was to get rid of people. All right? And if you shopped at Home Depot, 10 years ago, you saw the impact of that. You just couldn't get help in those stores. There's nobody around. Today, you go into Home Depot, you can't go 10 steps without running somebody with an orange apron. Why do I say that? Because 10 years ago, Home Depot stock was about $30 a share. Today it's close to $200. They have hired more people, and yet the value of their company has gone up despite that added expense. Why is that? Because it's the quality of care that they give their customers. We are no different here. We care about our customers, and so we hire people to take care of them.
Chairman, the one thing you might, if that question were to come up again, I think the other important fact is we don't have any capital loaded into the budget to offset the 70%. If that makes sense. If we were funding more capital in the general fund,
It would be
the
less.
70% would shrink down
It would
and
less.
it would be more in line.
A lot of those capitals are over in SPLOST.
Correct, sir.
Right. Yes.
In hiring new people, new hires, do they fall under the pension plan or
They follow the hybrid plan.
hybrid?
Hybrid plan, yes. We changed our formula a number of years ago to address cost-saving measure. And the bottom line is, I'm going to be upfront here about that retirement plan. It is not as generous as mine is in the military. You will very difficult to live on our retirement plan in this county, on our current pension plan. Yes.
Okay, so you have this budget issue, and I'm looking at this and I don't want fluffy stuff.
Right.
And so you have these senior centers where they're just like playing pool or doing dancing.
Right.
Why don't you let the churches and nonprofits take care of the seniors? Why should I, the taxpayer, care and have to do things for seniors?
Oh, great question. And let me get a list of pastors for you. You can call them and ask them that. You know, it's always about money, but it shouldn't always be about money. And the kind of county that you want to be, the kind of person you want to be, reflects how you spend your money. Someone once said, what comes out of your wallet reflects the kind of person that you are. I think the kind of money that we use as a county to fund programs reflects the kind of county that we, over the last 2 generations, have desired to become, which is a compassionate county that cares about its people. You know, the number one issue for seniors isn't healthcare problems, it's loneliness. Now, we can't solve the problem of, the 80,000 seniors we have in Cobb County that are over 55. But it doesn't mean that we can't make the effort to do that. And the senior centers, believe it or not, we only required the law to have 1 senior center. The North Cobb Senior Center is the only one that we needed to have built to respond to the American Disabilities Act. The rest of them we built over the last 50 years to reflect an aging community that paid taxes, that was aware of the fact that when they retired, they still wanted to have fellowship. And that's what these senior centers are. And I would only ask you that until you're in their shoes, you don't know how important these senior centers are to these seniors. I think this is a program that deserves and merits our funding at $5 a month. Yes.
Yeah, I have a neighbor who is a police officer with Cobb, and he said that he recently hired on with Cobb, and he's 32 years old, and he says with the current retirement that they have, he's going to have to work 30 years, and he got to asking me why we thought the military's retirement was based at 20 years, and I said, well, I guess because we don't want 50-year-old soldiers fighting our battles for us, and that made me think, okay, so you're going to be 60 when you retire from the police department.
Right.
Well, I want 60-year-old police officers patrolling my streets and taking care of me. And that got me to thinking that, are we really taking care of our public safety folks to require them to work 30 years when the average employee coming to work for Cobb is 30 years old in public safety?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that this year, when you look at the budget and what we're trying to propose, you're going to see that we're aware of those concerns, but again, it all goes back down to money. How much is the taxpayer willing to bear, even acknowledging that public safety is a number priority? And as I've come to see over my time in office, it's well and easy to talk about saying you want something, right up to the time that I ask you to give me some money to do it. So,
But I don't think that it's the public today that's concerned. It's those people 20 years from now when these employees have been here for 20 years
Right.
and now they're locked in, and now you're faced with that. So we're not affected by that today, but it's going to be 20 years from now when we have these 50, 60-year-old firefighters and police officers out patrolling our streets because they can't retire unless they have
Sure.
30 years. And now I'm hearing through the grapevine that there may be the possibility that it go to a rule of 85. So that takes them into their 60s. So that has a lot of concern for me, for people that we prioritize as being number
Right.
one in our budget.
well, the beauty of the current system we have here in government is that every one of the department heads, their responsibility is to bring these kind of issues up during the budget process so that we can address them and see if the budget process is the appropriate place to do that, or to take it to some of the committees like the compensation committee. There are a number of mechanisms that we have in place right now to talk to those issues. They're not easily solved, all right? But the good news is I give confidence to everybody in the world now that since I ran for chairman at 68 and won, we have a second life for everybody here. You just got to find the right number of counties to do that. But the bottom line is, we have to do more than just talk the talk about public safety. We have to walk the walk. And my budget this year is going to reflect that. I hear the commissioners talking about we need to do more public safety. They've done some things last year that convinced me they want to do more. So we're going to find out what their appetite is for increasing funding for public safety this year.
Mr. Chairman, I was talking with my neighbor the other day. He showed me an article where the Braves were making record profits.
Sure.
And I think you're underestimating the amount of money the county spent on it. I read last year he wrote them a nearly $12 million check. None of us want any of our hard-earned money. I'm on a fixed income. I don't want any of my money to go pay in a private entity.
Right. Well, fortunately, you know, the Braves, like I said, the Braves are always going to be an open sore for many people. The $14 million.
We want parks.
You got a ballpark.
We got
Right, you got a ballpark. And I'm sorry the Yankees won't be there, all right? But the bottom line is that we had an obligation under this agreement with the Braves to provide them $14 million in infrastructure. And the agreement that we worked out with them last year met that obligation. I think it's very important to remember that if the Braves had not worked with us to come to an agreement on this infrastructure process, we would have had to write them a check for $14 million. Why? Because it goes to the point of we're a county that honors its word. And again, the good news about the Braves right now is that you know everything about the deal, whereas before we just didn't talk about it. And now that it's out in the open, people are are even more upset about it. But bottom line is, at least while I'm chairman, we're going to honor our commitments because it goes to the bigger issue of what kind of people are we, and we're people to keep our word. Yes.
Public safety is the highest priority for the county, in my opinion.
Right.
I see we have a fire fund. Why don't we have a police fund?
We're going to be doing that next year. Yeah, at the board, the board we agreed that we're going to establish a police fund next year and separate them out like we do for the fire fund.
So get down to the nitty gritty. How much you gonna raise the millage?
Well, I'm asking,
Obviously, that's what this is for.
yeah, I'm asking for 14.5 mils.
Have a new tennis center.
How are you gonna get the other commissioners to agree to it?
All right. Look, I don't know what the millage rate is right. I'm asking for 1.1 just to fill the hole, all right? But I think during the discussions, we're gonna get closer to 2. And here's the political issue. Once you start going above 2, all right, it's just very hard, it's a hard sell.
So Chairman, if you're gonna raise it to 1.1 and then that only just closes the gap.
Right.
Don't actually get anything in that desired bucket. And then you're talking about pulling things out of the SPOS bucket, and we
Right.
have a vote for that in 2 years, and then there's this whole transit discussion. All I hear is you just want more of my money.
Darn right. You Yankee fans, I want all of your money.
I want to retract that a move.
You know, I've thought about that, and this is why we were elected to make the hard calls. That's our job. And we were elected to lead. And I think it's important that I saw during my career is that all the way down to the Lance Corporal, they have to know exactly what it is we're trying to do. And during that discussion, we have input as to whether or not that's the best course of action. Well, right now, we have spent a year putting together all the courses of action that we think are important to continue to provide the services that the taxpayers have come to expect in this county. All right? And here's the cost of that. So the bottom line is that I want X millage rate. It closes the hole, but it also starts to address all those other shortfalls that I talked about in capitalization and people who take care of your services. So we're going to be asking for more than 1.1 mil. I'm fairly confident about that.
But none of the commissioners can agree.
Yeah.
How's that gonna happen?
Because at the end of the day, I'm the one that's going to have to announce the millage rate, because by law, we have to put something in the paper that says what the millage rate is. On June 12th, when we have our retreat, we're going to lay all the programs on the table, and we're going to come to a consensus on June 12th, as to what we want to buy, all right, what we want to do, and that will translate into a millage rate. And that's the millage rate that will be advertised in the paper. If we do not reach a consensus, then it is left to me to announce that number. And I'll announce that number, you know, if I don't get a consensus, based on what I've heard over the last year and during the presentations, and that's what we'll go forward with. Yes.
So a lot of your presentation highlights the fact that we have increased costs because we have more people moving in here.
One of the reasons, yes.
So it seems as well that we have a lot of development that's been approved, zoning changes.
Correct.
And seems like the commission keeps approving new subdivisions, which is translating to more people, which is translating to more cost.
Correct.
So why can't we just stop some of this development?
Well, the only way we can do that is there's two ways, really. One that would get us in the court right away, which is we just disapprove any future rezonings. But the real reason we can't stop the development is because of the land use map. The land use map breaks down the county into various zonings. And some of those zonings involve residential. People do not have to come to the county to get permission to develop on that property as long as their development matches the zoning that's on the land use map. All they need to do is come to us and get a land disturbance permit, and they can start bulldozing and building. So we're not going to go to a zero growth county unless we completely change the land use map. And we just approved the land use map in the 2040 plan here earlier or late last year. And I just want to encourage people to go to that map and see what it is the issue are. The problem isn't the development. The problem is that we have not built infrastructure to support that development, which is why we're going to have next year a huge discussion on transit and transportation. And I've said all along here, we have a county of 750,000 people, right? And over time, we built some infrastructure to accommodate that, as did the state. But we never built the infrastructure we needed to, meaning roads and transportation projects that would continue to support this development. Our development, in fact, has slowed, but it still has to deal with the people that are here, and more importantly, our good friends to the west and north of us who drive through us to get to work every day.
So why do you keep allowing apartments? Oh, there's just more people and more drain and what are you gonna, we can control that, can't we?
To some degree, but again, it all depends on where they put the apartments. You know, if I've noticed as we go to zonings that the lawyers have done a very good job of going around and talking to the neighbors and seeing if they support that development. That's certainly one of the big influential factors when commissioners go to vote on a zoning. And if the lawyers and developers have done their work and come in saying we've got support from the surrounding community, as we saw recently at the Kroger Mill project on Terrell Mill and Powers Ferry, then the board will probably support that because the neighbors support that. Every community is unique in the people that live there. And I would submit that if you look at the overall zonings that go on here, the zonings reflect the neighbors' concern about how they want their community to be. And we've in fact changed the nature of some of our zonings in response to the neighbors' concerns. Yes?
What is the actual shortfall for 30 million or for 55 million?
Well, it depends. You know, in a government, it could be everybody wants more. What we're trying to do is, what does that number really reflect that the taxpayers will understand that these are essential or mandated or desired services that reflect the current programs we have. We're not trying to expand what's on this map. We're just trying to pay for what's on this map. And within this map, there are certain programs where they want to have more, but we recognize the taxpayers are not going to support that, so we're not going to support that as commissioners. So the millage that we're asking for here is really a compromise between what it is the county governments want and what we think the taxpayers will bear. Yes?
Okay, so you're saying maybe you would like to get 2, but maybe 1.1. Let's say the board, y'all get them to vote for 1.4.
Okay.
Okay, so does that mean A, you're gonna have to get rid of stuff, and B, are you gonna be back next year asking for
No,
more again?
we're not doing this again next year.
Are you gonna get rid of stuff?
Here's the 1.1 million.
If you don't get what you think you need.
$1.1 million supports everything on this screen. That's all $1.1 million does, right?
Okay.
If we don't get 1.1 million. If we don't get that, then the question I have to people is, what on this section right here do you want me to take off?
But if you don't get your extra more of that, what happens to capital and all that other stuff?
That's why I think that the board is probably going to support a higher millage rate. Because they have seen during this last year what the requirements are from the departments.
So if you go up to 2 mills, 1.5, that means that you'll have forces to cut the grass and pick up litter?
Everything. We've heard from the people that they're tired of seeing garbage on the medians. They're tired of seeing, pretty flowers on the medians. We've heard that. We've heard the fact that there are certain communities here in Cobb County that believe they need to have more public safety. And we've seen all this because it's reflected in what the board has heard from the departments. So the reality is, the $1.1 million was just a starting point for discussion. I just simply wanted to pay for the lifestyle that we have now. And I think it's important to realize that we have found over $10 million in savings and efficiencies. So this isn't just write me a check. We have worked real hard to find improvements and savings in here, and we've done that. And we should have the slide for where's Rob? We're gonna have a slide for that, all right? That comes up. But the bottom line here is that we need to remember that if we choose to be the best county in Georgia, quality is not cheap. And to maintain that quality, we have to do certain enhancements. And those enhancements you're gonna see on the screen. Yes?
And one thing you haven't said today, you said a year ago, that I appreciate. Last year you said we cut to the bone, which you said, you haven't said that this year.
No,
I appreciate that because your answer's great on the quality we expect. Any organization can find fluff, but again, it's the expectations that we're gonna have the highest quality customer service, which.
We hear that you still wanna live in a high-quality county,
Yeah.
all right? And all I'm telling you is, this is the cost just to maintain these services that you have right now, all right? And why is that? Because remember, the previous charts, we rated other buckets to pay for the shortfalls. I have no other buckets to rate, which is why this year I'm coming to you asking for at least the 1.1 mil. But again, my guess is that we may go a little bit higher. To answer your question, there are some things here that we need to do, like the median mowing. All right? There are some programs here that we hear from the customers. I'm asking for fully funding of the libraries. Because it goes back to the point of, why is it I can give $6.4 million as part of an investment for a ball stadium, but I can't fully fund my libraries? It goes to the statement of the kind of county we are. We can do both, because they're both important. The stadium will bring us additional revenue. It has already done that, all right? But we need to get back to certain standards, and one of those is fully funding the libraries.
So the 1.1 will get us all those fleet vehicles and police cars and everything that was concerning at the very beginning?
It'll give us some of them, but not all of them. We will have to, in order to address the shortfall in vehicles, we'll need to have more.
Okay.
And
We're gonna stop at this point, if you don't mind, and then now we're gonna open it up for general questions
Oh, they're already in general questions.
and feedback, but we need to stop it so we
Yeah,
can share
just
some feedback.
the order of the presentation, things that worked, didn't work, any feedback?
Yeah.
Well, had he gone through your presentation?
We have some charts, we're waiting on 19 figures that
Okay.
we're still putting together, and a couple of
Because
things that he
part of
wants to
it, the
add.
plan was try to distract you from your presentation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I didn't know if we had done.
And he didn't play with his blocks either.
Right.
Well, I didn't want to right now. I don't need to. All right? The
All right.
blocks are on the screen.
So at this point, what we wanna do
But
is.
they're a great prop. The blocks are still gonna stay.
Yeah. So at this point, what we want to do is share with the chairman any observations that you had, any responses that he made to your questions that you thought he might need to focus on a little bit more or wasn't clear. Did he get off track? Did he need to speed it up? Does he need to slow it down? So at this point, we'll take feedback from the audience.
Too many
Yes, ma'am.
charts, too few charts, and stuff like that.
Yes.
Jackie, are they gonna have handouts of this pie chart sitting at their chairs? Because you cannot read that.
That's a good point.
Well, we've discussed that. This is the old chart. When we get the new figures in, we're gonna make them more readable on this.
Understood, but if you're in the back of East Cobb Senior
We will have a
Center and that
handout.
Font, you're not gonna be able, and that's important for when he's saying the desired, they're going with desired.
So on that chart,
So-
when he says desired, only desired will be on the screen, Janet. And then as he's talking about, they're gonna be in big bold font, and they're gonna be scrolling like the ends, like the credits at the end of a movie. So they will be seeing them go up in big font in a
I'm simply
rotation.
gonna say, I still think you need handouts.
Yeah, you're right.
I've
I
sat
agree.
in that room for different presentations, and if you're over here in the corner, forget seeing.
We're gonna have handouts.
It goes
Okay.
to my issue, and I'd
Okay.
like you, Janet, if the fonts have to be huge.
Yeah.
all right? It's like you should never go to those things without using the microphone.
And-
I listen to, well, I can speak above all, no, you can't, use the, there's just certain basic fundamental things we need to do, yeah, Randy.
Are you gonna, I know I asked you the question outright, but are you gonna go to what you think the board will recommend as far as a millage increase, a specific number?
I'm gonna let the board, I'm gonna let the board guide themselves to that number. And here's what's gonna happen, all right?
I'm talking about in your town hall meetings.
Well, am I gonna tell what the millage rate is? Absolutely. That'll be decided on October 12th, or June 12th. What's October 12th, besides Columbus Day? Yeah, it'll be, we're gonna come out of June 12th with a millage rate.
No, I'm talking about when you start your, town halls, which start when?
Well, so June
June
12th
18th.
is the retreat,
Okay,
right?
June 18th
And
is
so
first
June
town hall.
18th is the first town hall, so
Right.
what he's saying is by then he should have better.
There will be a
direction.
millage rate, I'll tell them what I'm asking for,
Gotcha.
okay? And now they're gonna say, well, look, you've been talking about 1.1 mil since Christmas time, you're right, that's when we need to fill the hole. But the budget process has revealed shortfalls or other programs they've heard from their constituents that are asking for more than just 1 point, for other things other than just filling the hole. And we're gonna have a list of those things that I'm gonna take into the, to the board. Well, actually, they're gonna get that list before Memorial Day, so it can ruin their Memorial Day weekend at the beach. They're gonna have a list of things that I heard during the budget presentations. And for those of you who don't know this, every commissioner sat down with me and with their corresponding departments, and they briefed me what their budgets were, what they wanted for 2019. And I've taken all those 4 presentations, and I've compressed what I heard into what I believe are additional things they want to increase, and then those, where the savings are, that we can reduce.
So I'm a super visual person, and I think that there's some, I could see there being some confusion about understanding about when you say to get to the 1.1, that's just to make us whole again.
Right.
Understanding the 1.1 makes us whole again as bare minimum services that we are now, or
Right.
makes us whole again 1.1 with the nice to haves?
No,
Correct.
that's with everything.
Yeah, okay, so.
There's no nice to
No, there's
haves
no
in
nice to haves, it's bare minimum. So that 1.1 number is just to keep the trains running the track, status quo as it is today, you're at 1.1. If you have a budget with nice to haves that are maybe coming out of the SPOS or that sort of thing, what is that number for the increase? And then, what does the SPOS look like when you're taking that out? So people understand,
Right.
because I think there's gonna be the confusion, particularly when it gets to transportation and parks and capital repairs, when you may get the issue 2 years down the road, when you're talking about SPOS, and they'll say, well, didn't you put that back in the county budget? Why are you asking this
Right.
again
But
in
it-
SPOS? So it's
right.
almost like 3 different,
Blocks.
Yeah, I'd say that too,
Buckets.
because when you say that's for everything, in my mind, I think, oh,
That's
that's all the
everything.
paving that
That's
SPOS
everything.
pays for, that's for the building maintenance we're doing right now with SPOS. I think you need to differentiate, that's bare minimum everything, it's not really everything, it's for those, it's for what you've got listed as desired, but it's none of the SPOS paid for stuff today.
Well, that's why I started out, that's a good point, and somewhere in the presentation, we have to talk about the SPOS, because there's a lot of confusion about what it is we do with the general fund money. And I'm just really surprised that, you know, reading in John's newspaper, people keep mixing up SPOS projects with general fund. And they don't mix. By law, they can't
No,
mix.
yes, sir, I think they still will, I think if you say that 1.1 covers everything, they think, no matter what you say, I think they're
Okay.
gonna think everything.
Well,
They
what
think
else, look,
everything.
1.1 million,
1.1
1.1
mil.
mil.
Everything million.
1.1 mil buys everything on this chart. That's what it does, all right? But, and so,
That's the bug.
all right, but what they're gonna say is I'm gonna go ahead and start the presentation with, this is the millage rate I'm asking for. And I don't know what that millage rate is yet, because the board is gonna help me set that millage rate. But I think it's very important to understand that we were gonna come out of that board hearing with a millage rate, because I have to have one. And it's my job as the chairman to recommend a millage rate along with the budget. That's my job, that's one of my 2 jobs, so we're gonna have that. But I'm confident the board will help me set that millage rate. And the only reason I can say that is that I worked with these 4 people for 17 months now, and I'm confident they're going to do that. That's just a personal opinion, but based on significant experience, if you put facts in front of these commissioners, they will help you arrive at a decision that's the right decision.
Sir, let me just say this, when you say the 1.1 buys you this,
I'm
I
not,
think what,
I'm not talking 1.1. I'm gonna come into discussion, talking about this is the millage rate that I'm asking for, all right, and here's what it's gonna get you. That's how I'm gonna start. And they're gonna
Okay.
come back and say, what about the 1.1 million?
okay,
I'm saying,
that's what we.
and the answer is, I will put the charge, that's what that will buy, all right? That's what that will buy to keep us whole for 2019 if we do nothing else. All right?
But you need to say that does not include people. What you say is your priority is public safety. It does not include
Library
saying,
extended hours.
it does not include
But
library
I'm gonna,
extended.
but I'm gonna, that's what the whole thing is they're gonna get 3 charts, right? They're gonna get the SPOS chart. It's gonna show, this is what we buy with SPOS. Please don't mix up what's in SPOS with what we're buying for general fund, all right? They're gonna get the 1.1 mil. That's what's gonna buy, so we can keep the programs that we bought last year that you said you wanted to have. And by the way, in that 1.1 mil, we've already accounted for the savings that we have found. It's not just, I need $30 million more for you because I haven't done it. We've done our homework. If we hadn't done our homework, I'd be asking for $40 million from you. But we've done our homework. And then we're gonna have the 4th chart, which is the millage rate that we agreed on at the board on June 12th. And it's gonna have those projects that we have decided, that we're hearing from the constituents, or based on our homework over the last year, that we believe we need to maintain the quality of life we have in this county. All right? And you're gonna see things on there like public safety.
Okay.
You're gonna see things on there like median mowing. You're gonna see things on there like fully funding the libraries. That's what I think. But I won't know until June 12th.
Right.
When the board agrees with me or not. Because it doesn't do me any good to hear the board, and they say, no, I'm only gonna give you 1.4 million, and then I go and advertise a 1.9 millage rate. I will lose that vote,
Agreed.
all right?
No, I think you got it, I think what you're saying, the minimum, that's the bare bones to get us, to keep us where we are.
Right.
Without because there's no more money in reserve, and then all the nice to haves inside of that, and what that number is.
But the nice to haves are things that we have asked for the last 50 years.
Right, exactly.
These
Well,
aren't
and then
nice,
we didn't.
in your life,
Actually,
they're not nice to haves in your life.
They're not nice to
And
have.
every single person, every single thing here on this desired
It's not nice.
has a constituency.
Agreed.
I will guarantee you, I can go down here and find somebody in animal control, all right? It will bring out the dog lovers in the thousands. Because what they're gonna say is, you're gonna cut animal control.
They're racked in
I'm telling you, I've seen this now. Because every one of these constituencies has volunteers in this county that work there. They love these things. These things give them meaning in their life, and they will fight for it. So they're not really desires in their minds. They're mandated.
Yeah.
Great.
They're mandated.
You preach to the choir here.
Yes.
But he has to do that there. He's gotta do
Oh,
that
yeah,
there.
absolutely.
I'll be honest with you.
The floating homestead exemption, that's a good explanation.
Yeah.
Now, what is the difference in revenue from last year to this year of those who don't have homestead and the commercial assessments have gone up? How much more revenue?
$6 million.
Okay, the difference, more
Right.
revenue.
Right.
How is that kept up with the expenses? Is it,
Well, our expenses have remained flat.
okay.
That's the beauty, because we've deferred things. We haven't bought anything. We've just maintained what we had and lost some because we, in fact, the savings have been from defunding positions. We have, in fact, decided not, to take positions out of our budget. But we had a flat budget, but we're living on past glory.
But if you take, we've got things like healthcare, lots of
But
TAVT,
we
that
pay-
just eats that up.
But it does, but we've found ways to pay for it. Rather than using the millage rate, we've rated the reserves. No business would ever do that. They might do it one time. They wouldn't make it as a matter of policy to raise your reserves. Well, there are certain business practices we shouldn't be doing either, and that's one of them. This is the cost for running the kind of government that I hear, the board hears you want to have. And this is what, and we're gonna have a sheet up here that says, going back to my thing about this is what your home, this is what I'm paying against the general fund, it's gonna have a number on there. If you live in 150,000, if you go to your tax assessment and you look at that form that I'm gonna circle that I'm taxing you against, this is what it will cost you for that millage rate. We're gonna have that number this time. Okay, so if you live in a $50,000 house, it'll cost you X dollars. I mean, if you live in a $900,000 house, this is what's gonna cost you. We're gonna show that this time. So, it's all well and good to say that, you know, the average is $220 a year. That's great, except if you live in a $900,000 house, you know there's more than that. So we're gonna have a chart showing you this is what it will cost you per year and per month. Yes.
Could you throw out some really popular things that would be possible with a 2 mil increase? Yeah, Sunday hours for libraries.
We would certainly extend the hours for the libraries. We would do more involving DOT. People forget that during the recession, we defunded a number of positions in DOT. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 3,000 back orders to handle things like guardrails, potholes, you name it. So, you know, those requirements are there. So the list is long, but we don't want to turn it into a, you know, as I call it, a bridal shower gift list. That's the essentials. I think everybody needs to remember that, you know, we have a low millage rate because of what we've done here, but we have to get back to reality now. And I want to have a millage rate that once we set it, it is a millage rate that will sustain us. We do not have to come back and do this again next year. Because that means that we have not done our job. And you know something? You'll never get reelected if you keep doing this. But the customers don't understand why you keep jumping around. This is a one-time thing to fix a known problem, and now the problem has to be fixed.
Chairman, a couple of things. One, when you started off, and I appreciate, and I think others would, you know, you said that you've learned things that you didn't know before you were elected.
Right.
And I think there's still a lot of people who don't know the entire story, and I think that goes a long way
I agree.
personally. So I appreciate that. Big items you talked about, you know, and I know the health care, the pay raises and those things.
Right.
One thing that, you know, prior to you getting here, there was a commitment to the take-home cards and public
Sure.
safety,
Right.
the education pay, the shift differential, those incentives, and they were never really necessarily put in the budget as they were, you know, but those were other key parts. The Public Safety Training Center, and you said that was kind of on the board. My suggestion would be a couple of things. One, the options, only options we have is through the state training academy or out at North Central Georgia, which is also part of the state training academy. However, if you don't have properly trained officers, it's gonna cost you a lot of money in lawsuits.
Well, here's right here, as I tell people, why do we have this $12 million for the unified court system? How many lawsuits can I tolerate from false arrests? You know, because we didn't update when a judge goes and dismisses the warrant, and it doesn't get into the system, and the police officer pulls somebody over, and that warrant that was dismissed is not in the system, and you arrest the person. How many of these you know, false, unjustified arrests can I support to get to $12 million? Now, we're not gonna pay for $12 million in 1 year, we're gonna spread that out. The bottom line is,
there's cost associated with each one of those desires.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
And one of the things I think we need to be mindful of too, rather than chairman owning this on his own, I think the pronoun we.
Yes.
Don't say I, if you don't mind, sir, as much, because it's not just you. This is the taxpayers' $12 million, that if we get sued, guess who's gonna pay that tab? So make it maybe sound like, how much can you tolerate? How much can we tolerate? And we're trying to be preventive in that. Okay,
Yes.
Tracy?
So, tagging on to what Sam said, I think that when I heard you talk about all of this, and you talk about, you give yourself a moment at the beginning of the conversation to be a little bit vulnerable, it's actually a strength for you. Because when you're able to say, look, I was sitting where you were sitting,
Yeah.
and I took it upon myself to run, and I was elected. And what I didn't know were 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
That
It's powerful.
immediately disarms that group of people and makes you a little more approachable. And not that you're not, I'm just saying they are disarmed a little bit. And then 2 things that are helpful to me when people are asking me questions, instead of responding, well, such and such, but, da-da-da, such and such, and, it takes it off of the defensive, and it changes the way the person hears it, because sometimes when people hear the word but, they're like, well, but, here's the well, and I'm gonna
Famous
tell
but.
you.
Yeah.
So I think and you say it a lot, and I realize I say it a lot, and now that I've changed it,
Well,
kind
and
of
one
like
of the
the
things
vernacular.
we talk about is it's kind of repeating what I hear you.
Mhm.
I hear what you're saying. You're right. I totally understand where you are.
Yeah.
When you walk up to someone and you're using your gesture, you give them eye contact. You're exactly right.
Mhm.
Let me explain, and then you go from there. So acknowledging that what you are hearing
Mirroring,
is valid.
paraphrasing.
The way you feel is a valid feeling, and then hit them with the fact.
I hear you think you feel blank because blank.
Exactly.
And, da, 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 da. And then the third thing is, try to not get defensive. When you start to talk fast and your voice raises, and mine does the same thing, and it sounds like I'm being defensive when I'm really just trying to get my point across. It's
But the good
just-
thing is we videotaped it today,
Yeah.
and so the chairman will hopefully go back and watch it, and he'll see mannerisms, body language, eye contact, and then he can address it and go from there.
They gonna make
Yes, hey. Hey,
Hi.
hey, Doc.
That moment just a couple of minutes ago where you started explaining that the desired services were mandated and were essential, that your friends and neighbors,
Yeah.
that was the most powerful part of the presentation, and it didn't have anything to do with the rest of your presentation. That moment right then where you said, you may not think this is essential.
Exactly.
But you have people in this county who think this is essential.
Right. I think it's
Because there's a
mandated.
lot of people that don't think that's essential,
Right.
You're right.
and they may not, and
Right.
you can tell them, you may not, and that's okay.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who do.
Yeah.
And that right there, I mean, that convinced me of, you know what, you're right, that's important.
That's the thing
Because
I've seen in the job.
everything else you said didn't convince me that that was important until that moment.
It's interesting too, last night we had Cobb 101 Academy with support services, and they did an awesome job. But at the end, I told them that get ready, we're gonna have you guys do this budget thing, and we're gonna give you all the information that the chairman is gonna have and be presenting at the town halls. And I said, so, okay, so we're gonna talk about this, but why are we buying property and all these other things if we can't afford what we have? Why do we keep doing it? They asked those questions, did they, Eddie?
They did.
Then they turn around and said, well, why don't you just cut so-and-so? And oh my gosh, no, you're not gonna touch so-and-so.
right on.
I was like, hold up, we haven't gotten to that exercise. So what you will find, we haven't even gotten there, but some of the things that they were offering that the chairman should do, why doesn't he consider this? Or why do we keep doing that? Everybody in there. And what we realized and explained to them, that everything is on that list is there because somebody felt it was important enough to put it there. It's not like the chairman just woke up and said, we're gonna add tennis courts to the desire. No, somebody wanted tennis courts, and a commissioner said, let's do tennis courts.
More importantly, we had 3 commissioners at least that said let's do
Exactly.
tennis courts. Yes,
Exactly.
sir.
I know transit didn't come up, and I think it probably is gonna come up, especially with the House bill, but I know the last time we met in our budget discussions,
Right.
Commissioner, you did a great job of explaining the dependency we have on that system. And
We got the chart, the overlay, the chairman asked us to provide that too.
I would be surprised if somebody doesn't ask why we provide a $12 million subsidy to transit.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting to answer that.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, that's a system we really should be proud of.
we should.
Yes.
I had a little bit of concern from the vantage point of Joe's Republic. On the slide where you were doing the millage, and you said, we used to do the splosh, we have the splosh now,
Right.
and we don't. And it was almost like I was getting confused on what was the point, and was this a shell game? you know, we
Yeah,
had
it
SPOS,
is a
we
shell
don't have
game.
SPOS. And so.
It is a shell game.
It is a shell
Yeah,
game,
right.
but I'm not sure that doesn't muddy up the waters. And I would just say, look
But-
at how much you
But
say
you,
on
but you
that.
get to my point, you
But,
made
yeah.
the point perfectly. That's why everybody's confused, because the water is
Right.
muddy.
Right,
All right, what we have done has really muddied the water.
right,
The danger is you don't want to get into the weeds.
yeah, and
But
that,
here's the
that
real,
became my
here's the
concern
real,
on that.
here's the real problem with SPOS. Is take a look at the current SPOS. Don't get me wrong, I support the SPOS. I mean, I have my issues with it, but overall, because we deliver exactly what we say we're gonna do, that's why the SPOS has been supported. It's not funny money.
Right.
We do exactly what we say we're gonna do with it. But as you look at this year, the 2016 SPOS, we initially used that SPOS to do things like paving roads and building the courthouse. But what's happened now is we started to insert general fund projects into SPOS, and that means that we reduce the amount of roads we can pave every year because we use less money. That's the danger of what we're getting into. And here's the overall danger, is if in 2021, when we go to renew the SPOS, if we want to do really big ticket items, we have to kick stuff back out of SPOS that we've been paying for, back into general fund, which does what? Raises the millage rate.
So have you in that ideal number, the biggest millage number, have you kicked out of SPOS what you truly need in order to not have to get in that scenario in 2021?
No, but I'm gonna pander to you, all right? Because I've learned a long time ago, politicians never get to a crisis until it becomes a real crisis. And the answer is, yes, I have, all right? But what I don't wanna do is that create the scenario that I'm gonna be raising the millage rate in the future. We have to establish a millage rate this time that we're gonna live with for a long time. That's what we have to do, and that's the world we're gonna live with.
So I would caution you then to not say, we're not gonna go raise the millage again, that's not gonna happen, if you gotta figure out which battle you wanna pick
It's true, but I know
politically.
next year my issue is transit, all right?
Yes.
And from what I've seen this year on the budget, we cannot have this discussion again next summer. It's too much for the voter. All right, it really is. And you know something? If I was sitting in their seat, I would agree with them. This time, we have to leave, we're gonna set this millage rate. It's the right millage rate because we've done our homework, and we're not gonna touch it again for a while unless we have some requirement that comes up that we didn't foresee. But I go back to our job as elected officials is to make the hard call. That's our job. All right? We are elected to lead. And deep down inside, I really believe that most of them are glad that we have to make the decision and they don't, right? But that's okay. Because I really believe that the people in the end will respect you for making the hard call, even if they don't agree with you.
And I think at some point, we have to give value to the silent majority and quit giving so much value to the vocal minority. So when you talk about, and you said it, that, you know, people are not gonna get over the Braves. I was at the Braves game this week with 40,000 people. 40,000 got over it and went to the Braves game Tuesday night. So I think you have to be careful in your assumption that everybody is upset by something. If you're getting 100 people at a town hall, you got 798,000 people and 900 whatever stayed home because they're okay. So I think you have to be careful that that minority gets to rule because they're the ones that you're hearing from.
Sure.
The other people are perfectly happy because you're not hearing from them. So I think you have to walk a balance that
Well-
we can't cater to the ones you hear from.
I'm still
The other
hearing-
people are still here.
But I'm still hearing the voices that I knocked on doors.
And I understand that, but I also, we live and we're in those neighborhoods, and the people in my neighborhood don't have a clue this discussion is happening because they're happy. Their services are being met and whatever, so they have no idea about this. So if I mention people in the community, they're upset, they don't even know they exist. So I just caution you not to give them too much credit,
Right.
because in your world, you know who they are, but in the majority of the county, nobody knows they exist.
But I
So
do, I do want to acknowledge, we still
we
need
need
to.
to be careful.
We just need to remember that the people in this county are very, very conservative, and they listen. They do. And what I have to, because it's one of those tenets that I got elected on, is that I heard them, and, you know, if we had any sense of humor, what I'm telling them is that, look, before you weren't sure what you're unhappy about, now I'm telling you what you're unhappy about, okay? Because that's why we're doing these discussions. Nobody likes to raise taxes, but the Braves are gonna come up. And the reason they're gonna come up is because we are, for the foreseeable future, gonna have to contribute somewhere around $5 million a year to that part of the partnership. And that just brings up memories. And I just need to acknowledge that I still hear you, it still shapes, you know, how I govern, because it's how I got into office. But I think it's also important to remember that I didn't get into office, all right, to break a contract. And that's that's hard for them to swallow. They thought I was actually gonna come in here and just change that contract. That was never gonna happen, all right? Contract was signed by two parties that were fully informed about what they were signing, and we're gonna honor that contract, yes.
Will any of this information be available online in any form?
Yes, yeah, we'll put all this online, you bet. Be on the webpage.
Yeah, it will be in the storybook form, that they'll be able to go in and they'll see everything he's doing.
And we're also gonna be looking for feedback online. And I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, they will.
You know, people, emails work, and so do town halls, yes, Bill.
You probably can hear a lot of people give you a lot of different advice, and it's probably impossible to keep up with all that, but if I hear a central theme that I keep hearing, one, distrust of government you're speaking to.
Sure, right.
And so when people know your motive, you eliminate that distrust. And two, your campaign was based on transparency. If you get to a point where you're overwhelmed, and you got information overload, and you're trying to figure out what to say, if you can fall back to on, you're being very transparent, that's what you got elected for, and your motive is to do what's best for Cobb, nobody can get you. Because I think at the core of who you are, that's something no one can argue with. You're trying to do what's best for Cobb. That doesn't have to be practiced. That doesn't have to be memorized. That even doesn't have to be listed, practice or anything. That's who you are. And then number two, you're being transparent. Not everybody wants to hear that. Not everybody likes that. Not even me sometimes. But that's who you are. And when you fall back to that, if you do get hit and overwhelmed, I think you're going to be fine.
Well, here's something else that I think is very important about this process. Even if the board, let's say the board comes out and agrees on millage rate X, all right? And that's what I go on the road and start, proposing. The beauty of this process is the people can still argue and support a higher or lower millage rate. Now, I can't go any higher than what I submit to the paper, all right? But we can go lower. If what we take out there clearly doesn't, clearly isn't gonna support some parts of that proposed budget, we can always lower that millage rate. That's the beauty of the 7 town halls and the 6 public hearings. This is not set in concrete. This is truly an exchange with the public to get your ideas on whether or not you support what we're trying to do. And then when we go to vote on this thing on July 24th, we'll have had plenty of opportunity for everybody to understand how the public sentiment is, plus what it is we want to do. What's the middle ground?
Now, you say it's not set, the high number is set.
It is.
Once you-
I can't go above that number.
And you have to give that by June to the.
But you're not.
July 2nd, I got you, okay, all right.
But you're not gonna use the number from the June 12th budget retreat, whatever that number comes up to, as the advertising.
Yes, I am.
What if it's
So then if the
not?
public says they want more,
Then we got.
No, you can't do it.
You can't do it.
What I'm trying to get to is.
Go high.
Go higher, yeah, at least 2 mils or 2.5,
Well,
and you can always come down.
That's why we will have this discussion at the board.
But what if?
Look, I just want to say this. I just want to say this very openly. This board works well, right? This board works well. They are going to make.
We talking about the BOC.
We're talking the board of commissioners. That's right. This board works well.
I'm afraid I missed some meetings.
I hope I'm not the only one here that believes that, but I believe this. We're going to produce a number. We're going to produce a number on June 12th that we can live with. all right? It's easy, you know, as much as I love a benign dictatorship, all right? It doesn't work that way in our society.
So how are you gonna decide if they're all four got a different number?
Well,
Go with the highest
we're gonna
one?
work through that, Judy. All
Okay.
right? And then, like I said, the worst that's gonna happen is,
Right, he's gonna work
if,
through it.
if I get look, there's 5 of us, so, right? I'm gonna ultimately come up with a number, all right? And I'll explain to you what the number is. But the number is gonna, I believe, is gonna be a consensus of what the board wants. Because we're gonna have this same discussion on June 12th.
I just would round it up to.
So, but remember, there are politics too.
I know.
There are politics.
Or elected officials or politics?
No, there's politics, you know.
Now, poly is many, and ticks are blood-sucking organisms, so I don't know if that's what you meant to say or not.
There are elected officials.
There you go.
Okay? And is gas at $1 and at $1, you know, and 99 cents, at 1.99, is that $2 gas or $1 gas in the eye of the purchaser, all right?
And the
It
other
doesn't
thing,
matter, we're still purchasing.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
It's- Well, except for the tank that you drive, all right?
and
So,
one more thing that I didn't get to say, and I may have missed it in the
All right.
beginning when you're talking about the property taxes. I think these seniors, Lord, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna be one, I am one of them. They need to be reminded, they don't have to pay school taxes. I mean, everybody's on a fixed income. Come on, their property bill is.
well, the
a little
beauty of
bit
the
different.
seniors is I'm one too.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm using my tax assessment, which is why I'm showing, why Ross showed on there,
Okay.
that in
couldn't see
18 years, I pay $1 less now than I did 17 years ago for general fund purposes. And my overall savings are immense because I don't pay property tax. I mean, I'm really glad I'm a senior living in Cobb County. All right, I don't want to wear you all out, all right? I appreciate you coming here this morning. I'll stay behind if you want to have some individual comments. That's how it works in my world. Sometimes you don't want to talk in a crowd. But I'm really excited about doing this because this is going to be a conversation with the people. This is a town hall where I can hear from them. And we have done the right thing this year. We have gotten in front of the story. People know what we want to do. And the only thing that's probably going to be an issue is when we publish our millage rate, it's going to be the law, because of the statement that we have to publish with it, is going to have a gigantic percentage increase. All right? So we got to be prepared for that. And that's what's going to come out. How in the world can we have it, whatever it is, 25% increase in our millage rate? And the line is, just hear me out here, and then let's talk about what that really means. But I believe in the system. I believe in the commissioners. It's going to be you know, in some ways a fun summer. But as I saw during the apology tour for the senior centers, once you tell the people what it is you're trying to do, all right, the tone of the conversation changes. And I think a lot of them are going to come to this meeting because all they're seeing is, this is what we want from you. They don't see what's behind it. And that's my job, is to show them what's behind it. But more importantly, is to respond to how they give their input to us. And the board will respond to that too. So I'm confident about this. I am. I'm very confident about this. So thank you for coming today. Have a great weekend.